Hey everybody, this is your host Jeremy. I want to take a quick second at the beginning of the episode here just to let you know that we have launched a Patreon to support the show. Check us out at patreon.com/givingthemic. Your contribution helps us cover hosting costs, edit costs, and even some equipment upgrades. Patreon is a way that you can automatically support the show each month with a donation as little as $1. $5 every month gives you access to regular premium episodes as well as the backer-only special cat photo email list. You can actually see the cats of the host that you can hear in the background. Once again, that is at patreon.com/givingthemic. I thank you, or my co-hosts thank you, and the cats thank you. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a dork living in Portland, Oregon, who spent too many years listening to podcasts and not doing anything creative. This is my attempt to rectify that, to create and contribute something where I talk to people about their cultural obsessions and try to give some recommendations of my own. Welcome to Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person.
Those mics have seen things that you would never believe.
Wouldn't believe.
Yeah. Every Journey cover has put a weight on that mic until it will die. A horrible death eventually. It'll be like, don't stop believing.
I don't know why people don't do separate ways instead. It's way more fun to sing.
Yeah, it is much more fun.
Yeah,
no,
it is.
Sherry's not.
Oh yeah, Sherry's hard to sing to me.
Not if you're a singer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was gonna have to set that down.
Wasn't Sherry a solo track?
Oh, you're right. You're right. It was Steve Perry solo.
Oh, nice. I'd forgotten about that.
Okay.
I'm a baritone. I can't hit those notes.
Oh.
I'm a alto with
An alto.
with bad shit going on when I sing. That's what happens.
Gotcha. I am also I'm a baritone too because I'm not a bass, not a tenor.
So there you go.
Yeah, I can.
Those are your options, baby.
I can. Yeah, well, I can. I think my karaoke range is somewhere between Brian Ferry and Danzig.
Ooh.
You go with the Danzig then.
And I can do.
Mother.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Done. No singing on the podcast. No singing. All right.
Garrett's not here.
Let's go.
And without further ado, welcome everybody once again to Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. I am your host, Jeremy. I'd like to thank my three guests for joining us here on a coldish, rainy Saturday. Yeah, it's Saturday, not Sunday. Okay. Saturday afternoon in our scenic basement apartment recording studios. Going around the table to do a quick introduction. Guests, if you will introduce yourselves. Who wants to go first?
Go, Amy.
You're the smartest. You have a graduate degree.
You're the most academic.
You have to go ahead of me.
I'm the PhD.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Amy Samariva. I teach at Portland State University right now. I teach in the University Studies program, classes that are at the sophomore level, interdisciplinary kind of things about popular culture, American history, that sort of stuff.
So you mainly have, so pretty much your classes are full of just 19-year-olds?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
No, actually, there's more age differentiation.
Oh, okay.
But,
Oh, yeah, because it's Portland State. I lived in Ann Arbor for 10 years, so I'm used to the trad student. Well, then again, I was going to say trad student life, but hell, I was a trad student for 6 years, so
Same.
Figure that one out. But yes, thank you for joining us.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have an opportunity to talk about Hannibal and Hannigram, and I recently gave a presentation at the Film and History Conference on Hannigram fanfic.
Awesome. Wait, where was that?
Oh, it was in Milwaukee. Beautiful, exciting Milwaukee.
I love Milwaukee.
So
Wisconsin.
Yes, sorry, not
okay.
not
Portland.
not the suburb of Portland, but Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Neat.
Because that's where I work. I'm Jemiah Jefferson. I work for money as a proofreader at Dark Horse Comics. For 11 years, I was an assistant editor, and have recently just been released to doing nothing but proofreading.
Yeah,
which is it's great. It's vast vast preference on my part.
Oh, okay.
I'm not really. I'm not set up to be an assistant editor. I'm not set up to be an assistant anything really. And for what I actually do, my actual life is I am a novelist, and I write stuff, and every once in a while it gets into print. But mostly I just write stuff and try to find opportunities to write stuff.
Nice.
And I do a bunch of other stuff, but it's neither for money or what I primarily do, so
Fan fiction, maybe?
irrelevant. Yeah, I would say that pretty much every single thing that every piece of fiction that I've ever written has been fan fiction, whether or not people can tell that that's the case.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah.
I am Natasha, resident fangirl, and also resident Star Wars nerd and hero villain shipper.
I don't know if you're the resident Star Wars nerd.
Okay, well, you're probably going to beat me on this.
We are peers.
Okay,
we
peers.
are Star Wars nerd peers.
All right. Yeah, you can. I don't even want the title,
You're not
so we can
alone.
share it. Thank you.
I want it. Star Wars forever.
Yes.
And as mentioned, the topic today, for as much as we have actual topics on this show, is getting into just fan fiction, its history, I guess your own particular histories with it, but also at some point I want to mention because I think I get a kick out of talking about psychological mechanisms. One thing I did want to at some point, hopefully we can talk about call it the psychological function it serves. Benefits and whatnot. To begin with, can you talk about your own personal histories with, I guess, let's cloud it together in this mix of like fandom and to the point of actually, fandoms of certain things to the point of actually wanting to get involved with. What would this be? What's a good we have to define our terms. What is a good? What's a good definition, working definition for what people would refer to as fan fiction? Go. Anyone?
I would say that fan fiction is a part and parcel of fandom that's been in existence since probably, I would say,
like 10 BC
Yep,
at least, or before.
It's metatextual writing of stories in a way that transforms them in a way that is indicative of what the writer wants out of the story, and also explores new territory. And it's been going on forever, for sure. But I mean, the major boost was the Kirk Spock shipping of the 60s and 70s. That's when you first got Slash. That's when you first got like women writing zines to each other, because that was pre-internet. So you had women writing stories about Star Trek, and a lot of those women writers actually went on to write for the actual series. And so what you see is this shift of these people that are doing this canon work where they're exploring the canon itself and being very textual about it, but creating new stories out of it. And it's always been very, very big part of fandom, but I think it's been misjudged and misaligned a lot because of the fact that it was primarily a women-centered thing.
Yeah, I would say that the fan fiction is when a pre-existing property or concept exists, that an original idea in a sort of fictive context exists. For example, a television show, Star Trek, and it has its own official storyline, characters, plots, situations. And when a viewer watches it and is engaged with it on a level for which they can then tell their own stories set inside that already established fictive universe, and yet are different from what is presented in a canonical context. That's the difference between canonical and non-canonical. If it's canonical, then it's from and understood to be the official storyline, and the sort of the powers that be are the ones who decide what is canonical, and then a fan is able to go in and build from those things, because they don't have to hew to canon if they don't want to. They can if they like, but they don't have to. But they create their own fictive works based on this established canonical property and its characteristics.
And the canonical property doesn't have to be all of the elements of the quote-unquote original work. So, for instance, perhaps you just take a couple of the characters and put them into a completely different situation.
Mm-hmm.
For example, as we were mentioning earlier, the much discussed and yet maligned but beloved coffee shop alternative universes. Or
much maligned, for sure.
Much maligned, and yet
one of the most popular.
Prolific.
Yeah.
What are the coffee shop alternative universes?
Basically, the premise is this. You take the characters that exist within the story and you put them into a coffee shop setting. So you'll have somebody working behind the counter and you'll have somebody that comes to the coffee shop every day. And so the whole idea is it's this domestic, very simplified, very kind of
sitcom-y
almost setting, yeah. Like, if you think about Friends, that all took place in a coffee shop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's probably the actual source of why that kind of captured the imagination of a fandom, where these sort of roles of the kind of like almost as pre-established roles of the people who run the coffee shop, the people who own the coffee shop, who are usually not the same ones who are running it, and then you have the patrons of the coffee shop, and you have the other people who are in the neighborhood that the coffee shop exists in. Mm-hmm. And then you can easily extrapolate the characters from a different situation onto these, and then they interact. And you wind them up and you let them go.
Yep.
So yeah, it's probably Friends that made people think of that, which really
I'm skeptical.
It's very disappointing.
I'm skeptical of wanting to position Friends as this kind of as a major touchstone. I mean, maybe a key touchstone.
Well, you could look at like Cheers, for example. You have everybody in
the bar.
a room. You have a one setting, and then you have everybody interact with that one setting. So yeah.
Yeah, but I think the part of this also has to do with not only the kinds of universes or worlds that we see in popular culture, but also the worlds we inhabit in daily life. A lot of folks that write in coffee shops. They go to coffee shops to do the work that they're doing. And so the coffee shop becomes their world.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes it becomes a microcosm of a general society that is widely understood by the majority of the reading audience.
Yeah, and I think a lot of fanfic revolves around a little bit more of the domesticity aspect of things. I don't know if you've experienced that with your fandoms, but a lot of what they're trying to get to is the characters are in a setting that is known to the reader and the writer, and it brings it down to a level where you can focus more on the interpersonal relationships rather than the driving drama or conflict that might be behind it.
The plot, as it were.
Yeah.
And going off of that point of particular fandoms, let's say, can you all talk about, I guess, your particular fandom, like kind of what led you into the more meta aspects of the meta writing, as it were?
When I was younger, the first thing I really loved in a really intense and passionate, all-involving kind of way was 9 Inch Nails, and but
which album?
Pretty Hate Machine.
Okay, yeah.
And then from there for many years.
Just making sure.
So I was probably Downward Spiral was like the end of my most intense, or just the intense period. Probably ended after that. So, but I didn't. I didn't engage in, writing anything. I wasn't aware that there might be a world out there for creating new content that was based around Trent Reznor or based around the music. But it was something I was a really passionate fan of, and it occupied a lot of space in my mind and in my emotional life. Many years later. There are other things I've always been fans of, I've always, been a fan since I think it was 1992 when Silence of the Lambs came out, and I was introduced to the concept of Hannibal Lecter, always a fan of Hannibal Lecter. And so when this new television show came out in 2013, I was very excited to check it out right away. There are a few things that would spur me to want to see, any kind of pop culture thing, like immediately as soon as it was available, but I was interested enough for this. And it immediately blew me away. And I was hooked throughout the whole thing. And I still didn't have any it hadn't occurred to me to try and pursue anything else with it. In between the seasons,
You just rewatch the episodes some more.
Yeah, I just watch the episodes some more, or I just, whine about, like how I couldn't wait for the next season to start, But after it was over, I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it.
Many bitter tears were wept.
I know. And
tears.
Bitter. And my very good friend is a big Stucky shipper and is engaged with a number of fandoms, and is big.
As a definition, Stucky.
Oh yes, Steve and
Steve Rogers
and Bucky
Barnes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Marvel Universe in general. And as a sort of portmanteau word for relationships, it's a very popular thing in general, I guess. But in fandom, it's a huge factor creating these portmanteau words to describe a relationship between two characters.
Has a portmanteau.
Every ship has a portmanteau,
Within,
even if it's not a great idea.
Yeah. Even the crack ones.
And especially the crack ones. That's where it gets fun. And we'll also define crack at a later time.
Yes, I'm excited to talk about space dogs and space chickens.
Delicious crack.
Astute listeners will remember our episode. Was it your first episode on? Natasha, where we talked about the John Locke conspiracy. Anyway,
when shippers go off the rails, this is a topic that I'm very familiar with.
Oh yeah.
But
I should wrp up. Should I wrap up?
Yeah,
No.
please continue.
Anyway, it was through my friend's involvement with MCU fandom that I started looking into what might be fandom for Hannibal, and there it was, and I started reading it, and the next thing I knew, I couldn't do or think anything else, and it had to become my next academic project.
Because it became your entire world, and so you tried to figure out something you could do to actually continue your life inside of this new realm that is the magic of Hannigram fanworks.
Oh yeah, but yeah. So Hannigram, Hannibal Lecter, and Will Graham, the FBI profiler who first recognizes that Hannibal Lecter is a cannibalistic serial killer.
Canon relationship, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, canon.
Yeah, it's canonical.
But this again is very meta, because the canon for the TV show is certainly not the same as canon for the series of movies or the novels.
Yeah.
So there's these multiple.
In a major way,
renditions.
Hannibal, the TV show, is a fan work based on the original novels, not necessarily the movies.
Yes.
So, it's a Hannibal as a TV show and as a sort of conceptual phenomenon is really interesting in the kind of larger study of what fan works are, and do they have a responsibility to hew to an original canon, or is there wiggle room there, and what is it that you can actually get away with, and what are the spaces in which you can actually get away with more variation on from the original canonical situation and relationships.
Exactly.
It's a deep,
A rich tapestry.
deep, rich tapestry
With minefields scattered throughout.
But that's what makes it fun.
How about you?
I'm sorry for interrupting so much.
No, it's all good. Thank you.
Because I also am a very, 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 very passionate fan of Hannibal, and a passionate fan of pretty much all Hannibal-based fan works, Hannigram and otherwise, and I've engaged pretty deeply on that level with a lot of fans internationally, because there's a really high level of kind of discourse. There's a really high level of thought and creativity that goes into creating the fan works based on Hannibal. So we're gonna excitedly talk about that quite a lot. For me, my sort of history of fandom and fan works it goes way back in a really it's kind of alarming. I've been a super passionate Star Wars fan since I was, I believe, 7, 8 years old, because Star Wars A New Hope, the original film, was put back into theatrical release in the months before its sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, was released in theaters. I saw Star Wars A New Hope in its original theatrical run when I was 4 years old, but I fell asleep because I was 4. Yeah. And so I didn't really remember it very much, but members of my family had seen it and they enjoyed it a lot, and so they took me to see it again in the months before The Empire Strikes Back came out, and I was completely drawn in. And then when I saw The Empire Strikes Back a few months after that, my life was very, very, very profoundly changed. Mm-hmm. I was very emotionally and very physically affected by the experience of seeing that film. I feel like it was my first experience with really seeing a movie on a more mature and more complex level than I had been able to before, because I was a little tiny kid, but in a way that was my first experience seeing a movie with a more adult perspective on my part, and it really just generated an insane amount of, when you're a kid, it's not quite as unusual to be a really passionate fan of something. It's by society it's seen to be a lot more acceptable. It's a lot more normal. And so I was hugely into it. I would play Let's Pretend. I read the novelizations over and over and over and over again, including writing sort of metatextual notes in the margins, generally taking the form of what I learned much later after experiencing the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then Mystery Science Theater, was me creating comedy riffs based on responses to the actual dialogue in the film and in the books. And so I would think of a funny joke would occur to me, and I would write it in the margin of the novelization. And I also didn't have very many books, so I read those books over and over and over again, and I read the Brian Daley Han Solo novels over and over, literally hundreds, thousands of times. And then I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark when it came out, and I created my first fan work when I was, I guess I would have been 9. I wrote and illustrated a 30-page comic strip inserting myself and my friends into a new adventure with Indiana Jones, where we were basically just being obnoxious little kids.
One quick question I have in terms of it's interesting to talk about how genre fandom existed outside in the before time, before people knew about it. Well, not just that.
The pre-internet era, right?
Yeah, pre-internet, but also before genre entertainment and nerd shit just
was acceptable,
subsumed all of pop culture.
Yeah.
Before it won, quote unquote, but it was kind of a thing of, That's the thing of like just look, instead of having an entire industry of say like licensed novels for proper. My question is because I'm thinking back of the because you mentioned the Star Wars novels and correction, the Star Wars novelizations.
The novelizations specifically.
The author of the first novelization, Ghost wrote it for George Lucas, was Alan Dean Foster.
Alan
That's
Dean
right.
Foster, my arch nemesis. No, I love him to death. He's also just so campy.
He's a friend of mine's parents.
Oh, nice.
Like actually in person, and apparently he's like absolutely delightful. I think that these days he's a horrifically bad writer.
Yeah.
He should really stop.
Yeah, please do not
But
write the
I
next
love you, man.
novelization
I love
for
you.
Star Wars because The Force Awakens
God.
one killed our fandom.
He was the first science fiction writer I really got into because my dad was a massive like sci-fi paperback 70s and 80s head, and so I would always have like these Alan Dean Foster books around. So I just 12-year-old me like, hey, we'll grab it and start reading.
Yeah, hey, it's a book. It looks kind of cool. It's got spaceships on the cover. I'll totally read this.
Yeah. Can I just mention, in terms of your question, the thing that I grew up with is it was pre-internet in terms of, well, I kind of grew up right when the internet was nascent, but we couldn't really access anything because it was shared computers for your family, so we wouldn't really go looking for, slash fic. Not until high school that happened. Gundam was a huge formative instinct for me.
Yeah.
But at the same token, like for a lot, that was the era of self-insert, and I
Yeah.
think that self-insert was what we all probably grew up with if we started writing early enough.
Yeah, for fan fiction writers in general, almost all of them started by inserting themselves into the story.
And your friends, of course.
And your friends, as applicable. And I think it's a really important sort of like first step into creating new concepts out of a concept that you know very well because you're a fan.
Yeah.
And that because you have engaged with it so much and so personally, that inserting yourself into the story just makes logical sense.
Yeah, especially if it's with a character that's kind of undervalued within the text, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of time you would do a self-insert with a character that you wouldn't necessarily have a canon relationship with. Like they're kind of undervalued and underserved within the narrative, so you want to see them have something happen. And you were also obsessed with that character, so you're writing from the perspective of, well, I'm going to detail all of their personalities and all of their canon background.
So are you saying that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is dead? Is
Oh, yeah.
fiction?
It totally is.
Who's served? Hesitation, love one.
Who's go?
Why?
Why not?
What for?
No! No synonyms. One all.
What in God's name is going on?
Foul, no rhetoric, 2-1.
What does it all add up to?
Can't you guess?
Are you addressing me? Is there anyone else? Who?
How would I know?
Why do you ask?
Are you serious?
Was that rhetoric?
No!
Statement. 2-all, game point.
What's the matter with you today?
When?
What?
Are you deaf?
Am I dead?
Yes or no?
Is there a choice?
Is there a God?
Foul. No non sequiturs. 3-2, 1 game all.
What's your name?
What's yours?
You first.
Statement. One love.
What's your name when you're at home?
What's yours?
When I'm at home?
Is it different at home?
What home?
Haven't you got one?
Why do you ask?
What are you driving at?
What's your name?
Repetition. 2 love. Match point.
Who do you think you are?
Rhetoric. Game and match. 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 Match.
It's
It
one of my
totally
favorite
is.
movies for that reason, too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Stoppard is one of the best fan fiction writers that there ever has been. Between Stoppard and oh gosh, musicals guy. I can't believe I'm blanking on this.
Sondheim?
I lost again. Sondheim.
Yeah, Sondheim.
They are some of the best fan fiction writers that there ever has been, and yet in most cases, if you ask, a particularly more stuffy academic, if you said that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead is fan fiction, they would be very offended by that idea, except that there literally is no difference between what they're doing and what 8-year-old in Poughkeepsie is doing, writing fanfic about Neo Yokio.
That's very true. And fan art actually falls into that, right?
Fan art, yes.
People malign fan art, and they're like, are you just going to draw fan art? And no, think about the Renaissance period. It was all fan art of the Bible and of the individual paintings they'd seen before them. So they were just copying.
The Bible is the most fanficked piece of literature there ever has been.
Exactly.
Shared cultural sources before mass media.
Exactly. This is how these concepts are actually propagated throughout culture, is by by enthusiast interpretations of the original texts.
Yeah.
And the fact that, we have a pre-existing term fan, and fan fiction it just kind of it colors it in a way that makes it unacceptable for a certain level of populace. It removes it tends to lessen its legitimacy in a way.
What, you mean there's something wrong with fanaticism?
Fanatics.
Everything in order, Mr. Dickens?
No, it is not. What did he say? Let me say this first. I'm not without a sense of humour. Dickens? Yes. Charles Dickens? Yes. The Charles Dickens.
Should I remove the gentleman, sir?
Charles Dickens, you're brilliant, you are. Completely 100% brilliant. I've read them all. Great Expectations, Oliver Twist, and what's the other one? The one with the ghost? Christmas Carol? No, the one with the trains. The Signalman, that's it. Terrifying. The best short story ever written. You're a genius.
You want me to get rid of him, sir?
No, I think he can stay. Honestly, Charles, can I call you Charles? I'm such a big fan. What? Big what? Fan. Number one fan, that's me. How exactly are you a fan? In what way do you resemble a means of keeping oneself cool? No, it means fanatic, devoted to. Mind you, I've got to say, that American bit of Martin Chuzzlewit, what's that about? Was that just padding or what? I mean, it's rubbish, that bit. I thought you said you were my fan. Oh, well, if you can't take criticism.
Anyway, so, that was my first experience doing fan work, and I had no idea that anybody else had ever done such a thing, and I wish I still had that, that
Purity.
Cartoon strip, because it was kind of amazing, totally genius. I'd never done anything like that before. I'd almost never written. I think it was my first actual creative writing project as well. And I wrote some other creative writing, like short stories or whatever, just to prove that I could as extra credit or some crap in elementary school because I was bored. And I started actually writing actual fan fiction, mostly about the band Duran Duran.
Yes.
First of all, with doing a sort of self-insert form of story, and then as I got more and more into the actual sort of mechanics of writing and plotting, I myself, as well as plenty of other terrible things happening in my life that made me wish to sort of diminish my interaction with even a fictive world. I mean, I wanted to interact less with the real world, but I even wanted to remove myself even from a fictive world. And so instead, the stories became just about the members of the band themselves and the relationships that I saw that were potentially, that could happen between them because it was kind of hot. It just kind of exploded from there.
Can I ask what in the self-insert stories? What was your relation to the band? Was your character in the fan universe? Were you
in the fictive sphere?
In the fictive sphere, were you their manager or just fan? Or
no, I was just a hot chick that they were interested in.
Oh, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, an adult doing living the sort of life that I kind of fantasized that I wanted for myself. 18, New York City, living as a model or something like that, and then I would meet them, and then we would, have hot sex.
Threesomes, right?
Oh yeah. And then
more
some,
some.
and more some. Because yes, I love them all to this very day. Yes, they're all hot. I love you all. I love you. But as time went on, I began to believe less in the validity of self-fantasy. I began to disbelieve and to the point where it became kind of offensive to me, where it still kind of is, of creating fantasy experiences and identities for oneself. I began to feel that it was
masturbatory.
Not even just masturbatory, because I don't have any problem with masturbation, but it's just thinking of oneself as kind of creating these fantasy identities for oneself, removes any importance or validity of the life that you're actually living right now.
Oh yeah.
So how about just don't fantasize, don't have fantasies about the things that you would love to be or the things that you hope that you're going to be. No, actually just focus on what you're actually doing. And it's easier in that way to just remove yourself from a fantastic story altogether and say, actually, I don't exist in that realm. And then later, as it goes along, you realize that no, you are the entirety of that fictive realm. And so it's not even just so much removing yourself from it. It's yourself begins, your individuality suffuses the entirety of this universe that you've created in your head. You don't have to have a little avatar of yourself in there, because you are all of it. Everything that you've thought of is also you. It's actually coming from the real you. That is much more valuable than any fantasy avatar that you can have and then stick them in a story and say, well, I'm hot and I have purple eyes and red hair and I'm a princess and I get to have all the hot sex.
It's always like that, right?
Yeah, and it's always like that. It's like, how about actually honoring your actual self and your actual ability to be creative, and your like the idea that you can do these things, that you are able to even think of these things, negates the fact that it removes the necessity of having a little, having a version of yourself in the story.
I was going to say, how does to reference a film you mentioned earlier, where does "Don't Dream It, Be It" fit in?
"Don't Dream It, Be It" is a wonderful rallying cry for everybody, which I think is true. That if you do create these if you do create a sort of fantasy avatar for yourself, and you fantasize yourself in this, glorious way, and you're famous and you live in New York City and you're a model and all that stuff, well, it's worth a try to just actually try to do that in your real life. If you can't do that because, it doesn't really work that way, the tension between what you fantasize that you always wanted to be and what you actually are in real life is that's a topic that's a different topic, and it's massive, and it's massively important. But in the context of fan works, I think that there are better or more and less sophisticated ways of approaching that. In terms of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, God bless it, it's less the film itself and more the concept of the meta experience of watching the film socially and responding to the film and using, the pre-existing response lines to the film. And I began very quickly to, I first, quickly memorized all the usual response lines, and then realized that I could actually come up with my own ones, and that I can come up with fresh ones every time. Right. I have more response lines than there's actual running time in the movie. I was going to say, at one point, when you learn, it's certainly learning the hard way of how to edit one's own, how to edit yourself, how to edit for time. Yeah, and learning comic timing, and learning exactly what is the pacing of a TV program, what is the pacing of a movie. Can you speak a line in the available space that you have? If you can't, don't do it. Yeah. If you can, though, do it quick and say it loud, and maybe maybe the crowd will respond. Right. Sometimes they won't, maybe they not. But it's basically like I based Rocky Horror, which I went to every single week for, I think, almost 3 years. It was essentially like me doing open mic stand up to an audience of 6 people who were pretty much not listening to me. but it was great practice.
I would say, but I think the interesting thing about Rocky Horror is that it's encourages participation, not only in the response, but also the rare venue where you have both audience responding to it, but also audience members performing.
Yeah, the shadow cast.
Yeah, the shadow cast. Performing what is on the, assuming there's an area for them to perform, and this was really, really weird at the State Theater in Ann Arbor, where because of the State Theater, which was much like how the Hollywood Theater in Portland, had their upper screening rooms were chopped off the chopped off balcony sections. Same thing in the State Theater. It was the State Theater, wasn't it? The State Theater in Ann Arbor. That was where I saw my first the first live performance, because I was not allowed to go to downtown Flint on Devil's Night to see it.
Not surprised.
To see it on growing up, the live shows there, even though my babysitter was one of my babysitters, and who was also a student of my mom's at her high school, was an active participant in, at one point, an eventual organizer of at least the production, if you will, in Flint. But in the I only bring up the State Theater because of it was that weird, like, they didn't really, whereas most movie theaters were they always had the stage, because the State Theater were like these upper screening rooms. You had this weird, there wasn't really a stage so much as like just a capped off, like they didn't really have it was like this weird angled capped off, what was it, like a weird angled capped off floor or something, where some people could try to, kind of jump up on this thing and do whatever. It was really, really hard when you try to get like a character in a wheelchair around there. But yeah, anyway.
That's great.
So there's that.
Can we take a quick break?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's take a quick break, and then be right back, and then it'll be Natasha's turn.
We can cover this in my thing, right?
I was going to say,
let's.
And
we'll go immediately into it.
And we're back. Let's see. Switching, I think we had at one point, Trent. I think it's Natasha, your turn for just if you want to, because you've talked about your history of fandom, but also I guess that had led you into the more fictive realm.
Yeah, so I grew up on fan fiction a lot, and I said masturbatory in terms of self-insert because I would only write self-insert with my friends and myself, and I also did not actually experience masturbation until my 20s. So this will lead a life of sorrow, and
Understandably.
and also creative fiction. I mean, a lot of the greatest writers were virgins. For a long time, Emily Dickinson for a long time, Lovecraft. Okay, well, we're not going to go down that road, but long story.
Emily was getting some.
She was getting some, right? Yeah. Okay, so long story short, I've always been a huge fan, and I've always appreciated the whole fanfic element of it, but I actually dropped off from that part of the internet for a long time. I was on LiveJournal. I was kind of just dabbling in it. I was reading sometimes, but, when fanfictionnet.net was out, what happened with that was that it was very scrubbed of sexuality, and it didn't have a lot to go on. Like, the best fic that I read was always written by my friends because they would have no qualms about writing sexuality into it. And so I never really engaged with that part of fandom until I hit The Force Awakens. And so what happened was I went to The Force Awakens, I watched it, I processed it, I went and saw it again, and I went and saw it again, and I went and saw it again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And I had this moment where I was like, I love every single one of these characters. I want to see all of these characters and what they can do. Yeah. I am also going to jump into the next 2 years of canon and find everything I can about the story and fucking just delve into it. And when you do that, like, you go off a fucking cliff, because you do. You I'm sure you've all experienced this with Hannibal, right? Like, you look into the production notes, you look into the scripts, you look into the novelizations, you look into whatever, right?
Storyboards.
Yep. And then I started writing meta around it. And that was where I kind of got into, like, if you're going to do something with it, try to be academic at it, but, like, not really, because I'm not really academic, because I'm just a noob.
But what are those differences?
There are no differences, right? I mean, it's a matter of, is it somebody edited it and somebody looked over it first? Probably not, but can people respond to it and call you out on it? Absolutely, which is nice, right? Like, especially on a platform like Tumblr, right? It was an interesting experience, because I put out my stuff, I talked about what I thought the story was about, which I was, like, very simple, okay, this is a female-centered story, which you don't get very often in terms of big movies, especially Star Wars. And then you go, well, what does a feminine-centered journey look like? A feminine-centered journey looks like the heroine's journey, which is different than the hero's journey. And here's who's to study the heroine's journey. Very, very few people have. I mean, since Joseph Campbell came out with the hero's journey, it's always been the same arc. And they assume women just fit into that role, but they really don't. There's a whole... there's a different pattern of events. Exactly. Different pattern of events. Whether you have, like, the fact that they usually don't have a bladed weapon, they usually use, like, stuff that's more soft, right? But, like, hard still. Or...
bow and arrow, ranged weapon.
Yeah. They have the descent, which is the modeling of the Hades-Persephone dynamic, which is very commonly put into not just male and female tropes, but also to male tropes as well. Like, there's the idea that you have to go into the underworld in order to pass through it and to come out into the light. And that's part of the female journey that I talked about. I wrote a lot of words on it. I met up with some really wonderful ladies that had also wrote up a lot of words on it. My friend wrote 10,000 words on it, and like highly cited, like to the point where she got like thousands of followers in like a very short period of time just because of what she was writing about. So, you know, we went through this kind of transformative period where we all responded very heavily to The Force Awakens, and we all kind of solidified on this point. And then when we realized that it wasn't a very popular opinion, that's when things started to change. And I'm sure you've all experienced antis in the Hannigram fandom, but probably not as much as we have.
Please elaborate on the concept of antis.
Yeah, you know about antis, right?
I'm not sure I do.
They're pronounced aunties, depending on where you're from.
Yeah, aunties. Yeah. So,
please define
anti-fans.
Anti-fans, and antis are antis of anything, right? Like you can be an anti of.
Is it like being a hater?
Yes.
Okay.
It's exactly like being a hater.
Okay.
It's like being a hater and trying to intellectually justify being a hater.
To the left. I don't truck with haters. I don't even see haters.
You just hit that block button, get them out of your life. That's the only way that you could experience fandom.
That's why we got haters. That's why we got haters. Haters everywhere we go. Haters everywhere we go. Haters everywhere we go. Where we go. Haters going down for the count.
But there are a lot of people that you know that's the way that they do it on social media, that they'll be constantly hating on something, and they hate on it more than anything else. Like, you would be more involved as a hater than you would be as a lover.
I did experience a lot of that with that magical experience we all know as heroes, where I got into rather a lot of unpleasant interactions with people who would accuse me personally of being racist, sexist, just a reductionist thing because my fandom on the show, which they had uncovered their own problems with,
personal issues,
their personal issues with, as well as dismissing my own mode of engagement with the show, which is on it's a sort of multi-level approach where there's an appreciation for, there's just an actual just appreciation for what I'm being shown and the artistry of what's going into it and the amount of work that goes into it, as well as a sort of like, you know, more arch amused like appreciation of it as a work of conscious and self-conscious camp in a superhero context, and that the show in a lot of ways was a brilliant sort of self-commentary on the sort of like tropes of superhero comics and the way that they use the structures of soap opera to extend and expand on a story. And if I brought those things up, then it would just descend into just like interpersonal ugliness, and it was just really, it was a very unpleasant experience. And so from that point on, I pretty much just stopped talking about it altogether.
Yeah, don't engage.
And I don't mention it publicly at all because I just got really, really tired of hearing and also just the specific patterns and phraseology that's used to provide a negative opinion on the show.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same wording as though they're receiving it from a sort of like central server of, if you don't like the show, you have to say exactly these words in this order.
Yeah.
And
the same tired arguments over and again. I was called a lusty soccer mom, a rape fetishist. The rape fetishist part was the fun part because I was engaging not just on Tumblr, but I was engaging on Reddit. And actually, I am personally responsible for the Zeitgeist movement on Reddit on the Star Wars Speculation sub, where they were able to talk about the topic without being... basically, there was a bunch of anti-feminist and misogynist bullshit that was on there, and I kind of had a night with a wine bottle and posted this shit. I was like, literally like, this is not Twilight. It's a feminine-centered narrative, but it is not Twilight. Can you fucking get my point? I don't like... No, what does this have... There's nothing in common with Twilight. This is the only story that you know, because you're men. You have no connection to the women in your lives. You don't give a shit about the other female fans. You talk over them all the time. You actually send these kind of long screeds about how apparently I like to get raped, and I love rape, and rape. You know, like, it was so horrible. As a sexual assault survivor, like, having to deal with that, like, on a personal level, I was like, no wonder women don't speak up. No wonder they don't talk about this.
Yeah, it's
and then,
so much easier to just completely disengage altogether.
And so I was like, but I was done.
I'm glad you did that work,
though. I've been in that, and so when I did that, I'm not like promoting myself here, but I mean, it did change things. Like, I had people come to me afterwards and were like, thank fucking Christ you said that, because
and it's actually okay to promote yourself, and you've really done something you should be proud of.
Yeah.
It's actually okay to promote yourself.
I mean, the worst part
it's better than okay.
I got doxxed over it. I had to leave Reddit entirely, which was fine. I totally needed to get out of that space anyway, because it's obviously not that
it's
great.
Gross.
Yeah, it's gross. It is. And lick my wounds, but also just sort of just realize that, like, we've been existing in the space for a long time where things are maligned as being, and the feminine is maligned, right?
Yeah. And and female sexuality is the greatest evil that humanity has ever created, and the fact that they begin with that perspective, like, that's where they start.
That's where you start.
It's impossible to actually even vaguely engage in conversation at that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hitting up, because I've just found a connection point with what we were talking about earlier. Going back to the history of fan fiction as a thing, and fan writing, because you were talking about women fan writers in zines and whatnot. Because I want to advance, going back to like the history of it. Can we talk about not just the, I guess, how did the internet change? Change or evolve or worsen or better just the practice and phenomenon of fan fiction? Because I think the internet shows up, it hits some fandom like in the 80s because you got Usenet and whatnot, and then this broad thing
by
in the
the
late 90s.
mid-90s.
Right. I'm just going to give a shout out to Archive of Our Own, because it changed fan fiction for the better.
Oh yeah,
it's
thank
awesome.
Goodness.
A quick rundown, if you would, of what is it? Archive?
Yeah, at first it was
Archive of Our Own.
Oh,
well, even before,
yeah.
So even before
that, our Coven of Our Own. Like,
even before this, you were just like individual sites, right? Like, where
and even before that, so you had you had the mailing lists and zines and
then like people's personal websites where they would just post particular fan works, in a section, but just, your basic HTML number 1.0. And so they would post their creative works there. And then also in that same format, you could then also post them and share them on Usenet.
Yeah, Usenet and Gopher, because that's where I first encountered it. I first encountered fan fiction myself in an internet form, dialing into, I think it was like Michigan State's statewide server in 93, 94.
BBS.
So. Oh yeah, but and seeing that stuff on, just seeing the collected posts, when people would post in story, almost serialize them, but they, on Usenet posts, collect them into a single file, and that's how I first encountered it. But
okay, so then from there,
wild.
I mean, I'm like, this is not my area.
No, we all know it. I mean, it went into, it definitely went into social media at some point, just depending on what you were into. There was message boards, of course. Message boards were the safest place to post stuff, so you wouldn't be attacked personally. And then you would go on LiveJournal. LiveJournal became kind of the...
And LiveJournal was, for a long time, really the major place where... first on people's personal LiveJournal accounts, and then in LiveJournal groups that had a particular fandom interest focus, and you could post your stories. You could send your stories there. You could post them there. You could send them to a moderator, and then they would post them. And then that just got more and more and more granular as time went on, and LiveJournal kind of proliferated. And then at the same time, other sort of
platforms
and other faces of being able to provide, serve information on the internet were simultaneously proliferating, and so gradually LiveJournal began to lose its importance as the one place that people who wrote fan fiction would have a place to then put it, and for people who are readers of fan fiction. And I would say that when it comes to fan fiction, I would say that there are 5 readers who've never written anything to every writer. And the fact that it's 5 to 1 now is amazing, because I think it was probably when I first learned that fan fiction was a thing, and that I was not the only person who'd ever done it. Which was, I think that was around 1987 or so, and I would buy collected, sort of like mimeographed collections of Star Trek fan fiction.
From like
just
the 80s or the 70s?
Yeah, from like the 70s and 80s, and I was just like, oh my god, someone else is doing this, and they write it about Star Trek? Oh, that's crazy. And then I read it, and I was like, oh, dude, that's really, really good. Oh, I like this a whole lot. Yep. And in those days, you had to literally just go and buy it at places, or you would get onto like an actual like mailing list.
I think they weren't they also like both the communication and also they were advertised in the. They should say fan interaction, but also advertised in like the back of like Starlog.
Yeah, exactly. They would actually, like, in the sort of like personals section at the ends, in the backs of these general science fiction fandom magazines, or in film fandom magazines, people would advertise that, just that they had a newsletter or something of the interest for this thing, Star Trek, or Blake 7, or Doctor Who, or whatever. And you'd send a self-addressed stamped envelope to them, and then they would send you back a thing. And in some cases, those were, a lot of the time, like, just a fandom zine in general would, have, like, pictures from a convention or whatever, or, like, somebody's, like, kind of breakdown of a favorite episode or something, and then they would also have a fan fiction story in there. And then, like, once you kind of had your kind of that tag who these people were, because they would have their contact information on their pieces, and you could write directly to them and be like, hey, that story was dope as hell, do you have any more? And then they would send you more, and then you'd become part of this like other strange, like very pointy-headed and reclusive kind of like fan community, very insular, and yet not really insular, because they were not excluding anyone.
No exclusion.
They were just very private about it, because I literally didn't think that anyone else wrote fan fiction. I mean, when I was doing it, I was terrified that anyone would find out that I was writing this stuff.
Right.
It was incredibly sexually explicit. I was 13 years old. That I was writing, in my case, writing about real people. I was writing RPF, real people fic, about bands, which I have continued to do, actually, and that I really enjoy doing, and writing these kind of like fictive contexts for the characters as I understand them, who are actual real people. But like, I was terrified that anyone would find out that I was doing it, because I was afraid that I would get sued.
Especially you mentioned, just to connect with that, and you mentioned that you were 13. I'm suddenly remembering talking about being 13 and writing explicit things about real people. How much Bob's Burgers do you watch?
What kind of a maniac wakes up an hour early to write erotic fan fiction? Me.
Are there any shows or movies left in the world that you haven't perved up?
No. That's why I've started writing erotic friend fiction, using people at school and zombies.
Oh, do the janitor and the vice principal. I think they'd have beautiful children.
I did, and they don't.
I watched all the Bob's Burgers that's on Netflix, and I really wish that they had even more of it because I enjoy it a great deal. It's a most wonderful show in all kinds of ways, and yes,
you're talking about Tina, aren't you?
Yes,
and yes, Tina is great.
Tina, the oldest daughter,
my spirit
and
animal.
Tina is one of the very best things that's actually ever happened to the concept of young women writing sexual fan works. Including about people in their real lives, which, God, I would never do that. That's new. No.
I mean...
And yet I really kind of wanted to, because there's no way I was actually going to be able to, go out with that boy. But I had to see him in class every time, and knowing that I'd already embarrassed myself by telling him that I thought he was cute, and then he told all of his friends, and then all of his friends would, punch me as they went past me in the hallway, and that was my teenage years. That was actually the nicer side of things. There was a lot uglier versions of me ever showing that I was attracted to anybody.
Been there.
It was really ugly, and to this day I have a hard time with it. Unless someone is an actual celebrity. If someone's actually famous, I have no problems being like, you look amazing in those jeans.
Right. They are.
You should wear that all the time. You look fantastic. And they're like, oh, well, gosh. If I say that to somebody who's not a celebrity, they're just like, get away from me. I'm calling the cops. I'm going to mace you. So God bless celebrities, because at least they're like, people like the way I look. This is cool.
So, you have LiveJournal. And you get fanfiction.net.
And there's fanfiction.net.
And what I don't know is how it is that fanfiction.net differs from AO3.
Oh, it's hilarious, actually.
The main difference, I would say, is that fanfiction.net went on a sort of purge, where they, first of all, made sure that it became... RPF was banned, and then anything past a certain level of sexual explicitness was banned.
Who would ever want to read that stuff then?
Exactly.
I mean, it sounds so boring.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they also have this whole...
They chased everybody off.
Yeah, there's a great history of it. I'll send you a link to it.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it's really hilarious. It's like it's a breakdown of what happened, because it was started kind of out of the blue by one person, and he did not know what he was getting into.
I guess not.
Yeah, he was like a college student. Anyway, they had to keep setting parameters, right? And then the parameter where they went on the purge, I think, was the whole idea that younger people were being sexualized, henceforth it's pedophilia.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and so...
Because people until they're 18 don't have any sexuality.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that you cannot actually write about someone under the age of 18 having sexual feelings or experiences, because you might get sued, because that's really, really, really not cool.
To grab onto that, the suing thing came actually out of Anne Rice. So Anne Rice actually literally sued people over fan fiction.
Yeah.
So,
she's great with that.
So,
that's why,
Metallica...
fuck you, Anne Rice.
Fuck you, Anne Rice.
It's over between us.
Yeah.
It's been over for a long time.
Our podcast, of course, is a platform that welcomes the boldest of stances.
Oh, good.
we
Holy shit snacks!
And
fuck you, Anne Rice.
Dramatic takes are welcome and not turned away here.
I just think about how her fandom could have actually grown.
Fucking shirt balls.
Like listening to her fans and actually experiencing it, because it was extremely slashed.
The nice thing about it is the fact that her writing is so incredibly bad these days that she really doesn't need anyone's help anymore.
No.
She needs to actually just work on literary prowess in a way that
just
stop writing, Anne. Just stop, please, God, just stop writing. It's really bad. It's really no good. You haven't written a good book since 1978.
You didn't have to combine your Vampire and Lasher series. Come on, guys.
Okay, so what years what were the years like for fanfiction.net?
It was early aughts, late 90s, right?
Yeah, late 90s, so like 98, 99 at the very earliest, and then by the early aughts, like around like 2000, 2001, 2002.
Big place for Harry Potter fanfic. That's why it was so scrubbed of sexuality.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It actually later on became a little bit more sexualized.
Yeah, and now fanfiction.net has, and it does still have a massive archive of very, like, there's a lot of really good...
Yes,
there's a lot of work on there that has a lot of literary merit and has a lot of really good, like, original ideas about the subjects that they're working on, except for that if you want any ideas of sexuality outside of the most tame and fluffy
it's
PG
fade to
rated,
black, or it's not even heavy petting. It's just fade to black. It's like maybe one kiss every chapter.
And so, if like me, part of the reason why you're interested in fan fiction is because it's one of the easiest and it's a free way of being able to see new voices and new concepts in the ideas of sex altogether.
For sure.
I think the two things that I wanted to bring up, both connecting to both, I think your timeline, and also, man, this is an extended subject.
Yeah, it really is. It's huge.
The two things that I wanted to ask about were both fan shipping, but also when and why did a lot of this head towards Tumblr? Of all, because it seems like of all the newer platforms, why did it go from, say, LiveJournal to, I think it effectively, like, Tumblr became like one of the main places for it.
Yeah, it became the kind of number one sort of like fandom destination in general.
Yeah, I was like, do you have any? Can you talk about? Yeah, it's like why?
But it is also it is also in its decline.
It is.
And I'm not entirely sure exactly why that is.
I can tell you in 5 seconds.
Yeah, tell me.
So they decided to do the same thing that Facebook does, for example, and post, instead of getting a timeline feed where you're actually seeing things as they're posted, their stuff is boosted.
Oh, yeah. So there's sponsored posts.
Algorithm.
I have noticed that a little bit, but I just now don't see that. Like, I have like a cognitive like advertising filter in my brain where I literally don't see or perceive advertising. It just doesn't connect to my optic nerve. I'm just like, whoosh, I don't even see it.
Yeah.
So I just like skip down and I'm just like, I need more Mad Max Fury Road fan art from that one artist.
That's the one thing about Tumblr that was better than LiveJournal, right? Like, Tumblr is a perfect feed for actual art.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of the fandoms that we're actually part of. Like, Hannigram has some of the best and most
the most beautiful.
It's not just the aesthetic, but it's also sort of like all of the symbolism that's encapsulated into it. Like, you guys have such great art, like.
And there's been a lot of like actual people who have like gathered and curated fan works, art, and stories, and then self-published them in hard copy form.
That's
and
great.
I have a couple of hardback compilations of Hannibal fan art and fan works, and they are gorgeous.
Yeah.
Some of the most beautiful publications I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And they're not even strictly legal to produce.
You're not
which also
to
makes
make
it kind of
money off
sexy.
Of them, but
no one is making money.
Yeah.
People are putting Kickstarter money into it for the production costs. The people who are putting it
also.
And the people who are putting it together don't get paid. They're doing it strictly for the love of it, and they're creating some of the most beautiful like publication products I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So I am especially hugely into Hannibal fandom for the amount of care and sensitivity that they bring to presenting fan works to the world, not just making the fan works themselves, but also sharing them with people. It's incredibly sophisticated. It's incredibly beautiful. It's incredibly nuanced. It's, it's showing me whole new worlds of, how things can be that I never conceived of. I love it. So I love my Hannibal fandom so much. I love you guys.
I love you guys too as an outsider because you're above the shit.
You are
honestly.
going to die. You are going to love it so hard.
Well, also too, like if you want to go into a fandom that has all this quote unquote problematic aspects to it, I hate that fucking
problematic
faves. We fucking hate that word.
Faves.
Yeah.
And boy, does it, because there has never been a queerer show. Ever.
More queer.
To this day.
Or more cannibalistic. And cannibalism is a kind of thing that most people just don't touch.
People don't touch it, and yet, in a lot of ways,
and
queer
it's so
sexuality
to the
is
story.
actually much more threatening to people than cannibalism
Yeah, the
is.
cannibalism, I mean, if you're looking at the fan, if you look at the fanfic as a indicator of what people find most troubling or disconcerting, the cannibalism just doesn't even rank
not
up
there.
Yeah,
it's a background noise, right?
Yeah. I mean, the casting and production of the show, almost every single person, I would say that 60% of all of the actors who've ever been on Hannibal are queer. 60% of all the people involved in the actual crew of the show are queer. It's not just we think this is fun. They are, like, Brian Fuller genuinely walks the fucking walk.
Yeah.
He is interested in diversity in viewpoints. He is interested in diversity of the people who look, the people on screen. He's interested in every single diverse voice in terms of creating, in terms of actual creativity. And he's just like, I'm a white guy. I'm a white guy. Yeah, I'm queer, but, like, I'm a white guy. It's up to me to, with the power that I have, provide a platform for other faces and other voices, and to show that I am only as important as everyone else that I work with.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be
it's so fantastic.
I wouldn't be so I wouldn't be so sanguine about Brian Fuller's diversity on the show, because I feel that there's a really strong particular kind of aesthetic to who he casts and his particular concerns with beauty. The show is so incredibly beautiful, and there's a real focus on kind of dominant discourse around beauty. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling very
No, I completely understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's
like they don't elevate people that are not traditionally beautiful, right?
Yeah, and so there's, I mean, it's not, it may...
Well, I feel that in Hannibal, that's a big part of, like, just the sort of, like, general aesthetic of that show.
Of course. I guess I'm just saying that people really want to not be critical and celebrate a lot of things about Brian Fuller, and I'm not against that. I guess I just think that in doing so, we can also hold some space for some ways in which it's still it still has to operate within
the status quo.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think it's a great criticism to have of shows nowadays, because I feel like they do not show things that they don't consider normal, but the normal level of normal is beautiful to the point of impossibility. That's my idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the show is incredibly queer, and in doing that, part of the way it's made possible is through its, refusal to challenge, other dominant discourses that keep the hierarchy in place.
Yeah,
you gotta, and a big part of that is wondering who it is who's making those final decisions.
Producers.
And, is it the producers, or is it the studio? Is it the people whose money is being used to actually bring this into creation? And in those situations, do you continue to engage while trying to work behind the scenes to make things better, or do you leave? And I think that there's a certain aspect of why Brian Fuller keeps on quitting his shows again and again, because he's frustrated about how much constraint on his visions of how things can be that he doesn't get to do, and he works on it for as long as he can, and then he's just like, okay, I'm off to the next thing. And particularly with I feel that in the sort of like casting, presentation, and ideas that we're being shown on Star Trek Discovery, It is a much more diverse and interesting presentation of humanity than has been, shown in any Star Trek show, but also in shows in general. And there was that, that there was a point where he decided that he was going to no longer be involved with the show after he had laid a lot of the groundwork for the idea, the fundamental ideas underlying the show, but that he felt that there was greater freedom to be found elsewhere, and that I feel like that his career has been really characterized by him seeking the maximum amount of freedom with each studio and each project that he works on, then becoming frustrated and then deciding that he's going to leave.
Rage quitting.
Yeah, so he's rage quitting, but he's just spreading this, spreading his seed.
Is it time to wrap it up?
Interesting ideas.
I was gonna say, yeah, because we're at 3:45.
Oh my!
Instead of as a bit of a twist to our, because we normally we'll do like we're endorsements and recommendations segment, like hey, what are you reading that you're checking out? As well as final thoughts.
We're just interested in The Last Jedi. That's all we care about right now.
Well, there's that, but it's at some point, yeah. This is a hell. We can get 2 or 3 shows out of this.
That's what I'm going to say. I think that we should do a follow-up episode after you're done with your quarter, and
also
I think I should watch Hannibal
seen
first.
The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will have a lot to say about that.
Me too.
If you can take a second, can you offer any recommended? I'm trying to think of a way to recommended things, thematically relevant recommended things of if there's anything you can recommend to the audience, be it published or even stuff on YouTube or whatnot of stuff that people should go check out, that get either examples of or of
further reading.
Yeah. What further if you're really excited, the Library of Congress suggests this and other books.
So,
but you don't have to take my word for it. Check it out.
I'm gonna put this in your show notes, and it is a essay published in 2002, actually March 1st of 2002. By Jessica Ruth on her site Diaryland. And the whole point of this essay was that she was talking about why slash meant a lot to her as a young woman. And this essay spoke to me a lot, especially since I didn't learn how to masturbate until I was in my 20s. Drive that in. I was upset with my body. I didn't like it. I didn't feel my own sexuality. And so slash spoke to me on a level of that, you could picture something and idealize it and not see yourself in it, but also see yourself in it. And that's exactly why it was appealing to me, and it has continued to be appealing to me. Please cut out my stuttering. No.
It's so charming, dear.
What we've never had any instances of the editor cutting out personal stuttering on this show.
Yeah, but the way that she talks about it is really great, and I think it means a lot.
I can't wait to read that. That sounds great.
I'll send you the link right now.
Awesome.
And it's because I'm following this wonderful blog that's fiction is not reality, and they talk a lot about anti-shipping, and a lot of anti-shipping actually goes into slash, and sadly we still have that kind of homophobia that we have had for a long time, and it's just being pushed into new forms. And they're not looking at necessarily as a homophobic relationship. They're always looking at it from the problematic aspects of is it abuse? And the abuse aspect doesn't really make sense to anybody on a real level, because it's fiction, right? Fiction is not abuse. Fiction is fictional characters interacting in a way that, yes, there are problematic elements, but they're not real.
Anybody who is an anti-shipper of Finn and Poe is a dumbass.
Yes.
Because, I'm sorry, it's the most loving thing I've seen in a very long time, and it's beautiful. And I'd love for them to have...
You're a storm pilot shipper,
that they just,
Yay.
sneak in little tiny moments where they just kind of, gaze at each other a little bit too long.
That's my jacket. Oh. No. Keep it. It suits you. You're a good man, Finn.
Oh, I need your help.
And we'll all just squeal about that because, of
Oscar
course,
Isaac
the two actors involved in the characters that are being shipped, they're I am so for this. I can't even tell you. That's fantastic. I would do it. I'll do it. If they decide that these two guys are going to become lovers, I am there. I'm going to wax. I'm going to wax and make sure that I'm ready for this show. It's going to be great.
Yep.
I am into this because I'm sorry. Yeah, he's really hot.
Mhm.
And
Well-
I think my character would go for that.
Yeah.
As a recommendation, I just say go to archiveofourown.org. Just go there and look up what you're interested in.
Yeah, you can search by, different kinds. You can search by characters. You can search by ships. You can search by shows. You can
browse.
You can browse. You can browse by any of those things. And you can also pick out any particular kind of activity that you want your characters to be engaging in.
Your kink.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or your level of kink.
Yes.
I remember a really fun evening that I had several years ago. It was probably like 13 years ago or something with some friends of mine in Seattle. We'd been drinking cocktails and smoking bowls all night, and we decided. And I had brought up the idea of Gimli Legolas slash, and my friends found it to be like laughably outrageous. But then immediately we got on the internet and found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories of Legolas Gimli slash.
As you do.
42.
42? Oh, that's not bad for a pointy-eared elvish princeling. I myself am sitting pretty on 43.
43.
He was already dead.
He was twitching.
He was twitching because he's got my axe embedded in his nervous system.
And then we began to try to come up with other pairings that we thought were completely outlandish. We found every single one of them.
Of course.
13 years ago.
Here's our explanation for crack, right? So a crack ship is when two people that absolutely have no interactions or absolutely have no character relationship end up together. And Legolas and Gimli is not, because they're very much best friends.
Yeah,
they're enemies. They're
I
enemies
saw it,
too,
man.
because
They
it's a dwarf and an elf, because they kind of hate each other. So that's actually there's a lot of conflict there. Anything with conflict in it is immediate attention, right? But like I actually and on that note, I shipped. I had a ship blog for K2SO and Jyn Erso from Rogue One.
Yeah,
because I'm an Elatytic fan, and some of the fic was about K2 Erso being a human. But it was Elatytic. I'm sorry.
Have you seen Reaper Sun's drawing of that?
No.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So
Send
I
it to me.
recommend Reaper Sun on Patreon, who does really great comics, and Reaper Sun. Yeah,
I
awesome
do,
stuff.
but I didn't know about that.
I mean, if I'm getting it straight, I believe that there is.
How do you spell that?
I also love Elatytic.
REA.
Oh, him on Dollhouse.
Oh my god.
Died. Hero villain ship. I'm sorry, but Alphas.
Reaper Sun.
Yeah.
All one word.
I can't decide if I like Alpha in clothes or out of clothes better.
Out of clothes.
Boy, he wears clothes so
And
brilliantly.
you wouldn't think Elatytic because he's swashed.
But he's built like a brick shit house.
And he's such a good villain in that show.
And he's from Texas.
He cuts people.
God bless him.
It's okay. I'm
So Reaper Sun, REAPERSON?
SUN.
SUN. As
Yeah.
in, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
564 patrons.
Yeah, I've
$5,000
been
a
really
month.
interested
That's right.
in
That's good.
Reaper Sun for a couple of years now because I had seen some of their work in some other fandom and really, really liked it, but I didn't know that they were doing. I wanted the robots. I love robots.
Just robots. My own recommendation is check our previous episode. I think it's like episode 15 or something, when we called the John Locke conspiracy that I believe we did in January of this year, where Natasha
And I want to go on the record as saying I love John Locke shippers and I think they're wonderful and there's nothing against them. My only beef with that whole fandom was the fact that of the people that were on Twitter harassing the actual actresses that were playing the parts that they weren't.
Yeah, that's never okay. Ever. Yeah. There's never.
And I will
a reason
gladly admit
for
I'm a
that
Shirley
to
shipper, but it's
happen.
not like it doesn't like infect
Yeah.
my like beliefs about John Locke. I love John Locke. It definitely is
Sherlock Moriarty.
Yeah.
Sherlock Moriarty. Exactly. That's Moriarty.
I have some fanfic recommendations of the stuff that I've written that maybe you're interested in.
Yeah.
I just want to say first, don't harass actresses on Twitter. You harass
actors, but especially not actresses.
You
That's not cool.
harass conservative politicians. You don't harass actresses.
Yeah. flick shit at Mike Pence. Don't be mean to Daisy Ridley. She's already over you. I mean,
Don't be
come
mean.
on.
Yeah, don't be
She's
mean to her.
already over you.
Yeah.
She's fine without your ass, okay?
So, but yeah, our earlier episode this year, I think episode 15 or so, I'll try to put a link in the show notes, was Natasha explaining us what was like a lot of the fan drama and whatnot with was it season ending of that season of Sherlock? Or something like that? I think,
Yeah, no.
Which one? Oh my god, Sherlock haters are the worst.
It was within the fandom itself, and it was just that they had a high expectation to the point where they created a conspiracy theory. And I love conspiracy theories within fandom because I live for that shit.
Yeah, that's great.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But at the same token, they were like it was like watching a waterfall of shit just cascade down Tumblr, and I'm like, oh, I'm part of this fandom. I'm part.
Can I dodge this? Oh no.
Yeah, like a two-story,
like a tiny little umbrella.
Yeah.
Like a
Wile E. Coyote.
Now, granted, that show was very in touch with its fans because there were so many
outhouse.
of them.
Mm-hmm.
But there were people making money off Patreon doing meta about John and
It's because I think that.
Hey everybody, this is your host Jeremy. I want to take a quick second at the beginning of the episode here just to let you know that we have launched a Patreon. Hey everybody, this is your host Jeremy. I want to take a quick second at the beginning of the episode here just to let you know that we have launched a Patreon to support the show. Check us out at patreon.com/givingthemic. Your contribution helps us cover hosting costs, edit costs, and even some equipment upgrades. Patreon is a way that you can automatically support the show each month with a donation as little as $1. $5 every month gives you access to regular premium episodes as well as the backer-only special cat photo email list. You can actually see the cats of the host that you can hear in the background. Once again, that is at patreon.com/givingthemic. I thank you, or my co-hosts thank you, and the cats thank you. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a dork living in Portland, Oregon, who spent too many years listening to podcasts and not doing anything creative. This is my attempt to rectify that, to create and contribute something where I talk to people about their cultural obsessions and try to give some recommendations of my own. Welcome to Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person.
Those mics have seen things that you would never believe.
Wouldn't believe.
Yeah. Every journey cover has put a weight on that mic until it will die. A horrible death eventually. It'll be like, don't stop believing.
I don't know why people don't do separate ways instead. It's way more fun to sing.
Yeah, it is much more fun.
Yeah, it is. Oh yeah, Sherry's hard to sing to me.
Not if you're a singer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just gonna have to set that down.
Wasn't Sherry a solo track?
Oh, you're right. It was Steve Perry solo.
Oh, nice. I'd forgotten about that.
Okay.
I'm a baritone. I can't hit those notes.
No.
I'm a alto with with bad shit going on when I sing. That's what happens.
Gotcha. I am also I'm a baritone too because I'm not a bass, not a tenor.
So that there you go.
Yeah, I can.
Those are your options, baby.
I can. Yeah, well, I can. I think my karaoke range is somewhere between Brian Ferry and Danzig.
Ooh.
You go with the Danzig then.
And I can do.
Mother.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Done. No singing on the podcast. No singing. All right.
Garrett's not here.
Let's go.
And without further ado, welcome everybody once again to Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. I am your host, Jeremy. I'd like to thank my three guests for joining us here on a coldish, rainy Saturday. Yeah, it's Saturday, not Sunday. Okay. Saturday afternoon in our scenic basement apartment recording studios. Going around the table to do a quick introduction. Guests, if you will introduce yourselves. Who wants to go first?
Go, Amy.
You're the smartest. You have a graduate
You're
degree.
the most academic.
You have to go ahead of me.
I'm the PhD.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Amy Samariva. I teach at Portland State University right now. I teach in the University Studies program, classes that are at the sophomore level, interdisciplinary kind of things about popular culture, American history, that sort of stuff.
So you mainly have, so pretty much your classes are full of just 19-year-olds?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
No, actually, there's more age differentiation.
Oh, okay.
But,
Oh, yeah, because it's Portland State. I lived in Ann Arbor for 10 years, so I'm used to the trad student. Well, then again, I was to say trad student life, but hell, I was a trad student for 6 years, so
Same.
Figure that one out. But yes, thank you for joining us.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have an opportunity to talk about Hannibal and Hannigram, and I recently gave a presentation at the Film and History Conference on Hannigram fanfic.
Awesome. Wait, where was that?
It was in Milwaukee. Beautiful, exciting Milwaukee.
I love Milwaukee.
So
Wisconsin.
Yes, yes. Sorry, not
Okay.
not
Portland.
not the suburb of Portland, but Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Neat.
Because that's where I work. I'm Jemiah Jefferson. I work for money as a proofreader at Dark Horse Comics. For 11 years, I was an assistant editor, and have recently just been released to doing nothing but proofreading.
Yeah,
which is it's great. It's vast preference on my part.
Oh, okay.
I'm not really. I'm not set up to be an assistant editor. I'm not set up to be an assistant anything really. For what I actually do, my actual life is I am a novelist, and I write stuff, and every once in a while it gets into print, but mostly I just write stuff and try to find opportunities to write stuff.
Nice.
And I do a bunch of other stuff, but it's neither for money or what I primarily do. So
fan fiction, maybe
irrelevant. Yeah, I would say that pretty much every single thing that every piece of fiction that I've ever written has been fan fiction, whether or not people can tell that that's the case.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah.
I am Natasha, resident fangirl, and also resident Star Wars nerd and hero villain shipper.
I don't know if you're the resident Star Wars nerd.
Okay, well, you're probably going to beat me on this.
We are peers.
Okay, we
are Star Wars nerd peers.
All right. Oh, yeah, you can. I don't even want the title,
You're not
so
alone.
we can share it. Thank you.
I want it. Star Wars forever.
Yes.
And as mentioned, the topic today, for as much as we have actual topics on this show, is getting into just fan fiction, its history, I guess your own particular histories with it, but also at some point I want to mention because I think I get a kick out of talking about psychological mechanisms. One thing I did want to at some point, hopefully we can talk about the psychological function it serves, benefits and whatnot. To begin with.